Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rose Report. Tonight, I'm joined by Patricia Patnode, a writer for the Conservator. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to have you on because you wrote a really interesting article that I found through Twitter titled "Resist the Binary Choice Between Career and Family." And I wanted to know what inspired you to write that article, especially at this time in the conservative movement.
So Charlie Kirk, who's the president and founder of Turning Point USA, answered a question that he was asked at one of the Turning Point rallies from a college student who's an aspiring surgeon. She said, "I really want to get married. I really want to have a family, as do, just most people in society. Um, what should I do if I also want to be a surgeon? There's time considerations with residency." And he gave an answer that I don't think is entirely wrong, but I think could have some very problematic implications. So I tried to explain what those implications are if you don't answer questions like that when your daughters, when your friends have them, very carefully. Because we definitely don't want to tell young women that you can either be a mother or you can have any sort of job. Like, that is not a helpful thing. And we are so far past that. So the article was a longer response to what was wrong with how Charlie answered that question, which I felt like he gave a binary answer. You could do one or you could do the other, when it should be more of an explanation of trade-offs. So I try to explain those trade-offs in the piece.
And you mentioned an interesting point that the key demographic for Turning Point and for other conservative organizations are young women on college campuses. And typically a young woman on college campus, I'm in college right now, I know this to be true, we have specific career dreams and we're paying for that either directly or through financial aid. So the idea that we're going to dismiss all of those career dreams when we're marketing to them doesn't really make sense. So in your view, what is like the medium path forward? How do we strike that balance between knowing that young women want to have families and also saying it's completely real and okay to want to have a career?
So there's actually this really wonderful movie that came out in the 2000s called Mona Lisa Smiles, and it
Oh
has
yeah,
like,
I've seen that. It's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
Julia Roberts in it. And the whole point of the movie is that women used to go to college, like middle class women, the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it was just assumed that they would take their college degree and they would just be very competent stay at home wives. And there was this huge move to try to get college educated women to go into the workforce. And now we have the opposite problem of all college educated women are not having children, and they're not wanting to have families, and they're not wanting to stay home. So it's interesting, like bookending like this time evolution of how college age women are thinking about careers and what we would like to do. And part of this problem is that we have very little understanding of our own fertility and fertility windows. And that, although information is like widely available on the internet, I know, like, I'm like a reasonable, like normal, like young person. I really didn't understand a lot of the fertility information until I'm 25, really until this year. I didn't understand miscarriage, like statistics with miscarriages, even like when you're fertile in a month, because that wasn't communicated to me in high school. And all of the messaging that I was given, just in general, is that you should be so scared to get pregnant because being pregnant will ruin your life.
Right.
You need to be very intentional when you want to have a child. You need to be able to afford it. And you should wait until after college to do all that stuff, because education is the most important thing. So given very little understanding of when is it like scientifically possible to have a child without spending thousands of dollars on IVF, going through other treatments. So I think that's the problem. People just don't know. They don't have information. And then when they're looking into it, they're 29 or they're 36, and the time window is much more narrow, and then people get stressed out.
And you mentioned that, and I didn't know some of this information you shared, that women under 30 have about 25% chance of getting pregnant naturally each cycle. So for young women who are pursuing either their postgraduate degree or their PhD, that could go well into their 30s. So in your view, how does the conservative movement market to those women who are pursuing strong academic paths but still want to have families? How do we do that in a way that doesn't alienate them or make it seem like we're trying to force one position or one path onto them?
I think the most helpful thing to do is to, in local school districts, is to try to encourage proper sex ed and fertility education. So that's just something that we could do proactively. And then for young people that are thinking about, what do I want to do with my career? We just need to say, if you want to have a baby, that really is 6 months that you probably won't be working or be at like a high capacity to work during the year. So you
Mhm.
need to be at a job that allows you to do that. And you just need to be comfortable with the impact that's going to have on your life, because it will be worth it, because being a mother and having a family is wonderful and a good thing. Um, and you will not be the same after you have a child, and that's okay. And you shouldn't be expected to be the same. And women are just different than men, and our bodies just, there's like just difficult like different physical consequences to having a
Mhm.
child and being pregnant. And it's different from every woman. Some women have really easy pregnancies, they want to go back to work right away. My mom did. She said that she was like, yeah, I was kind of bored during maternity leave, I wanted to go back to work. Other people leave and then they're like, yeah, I actually hated working, this is more fun, and this is what I'm going to do for a couple of years until I could have a different job. So I think that women can change their minds, and we're not totally comfortable with that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, having children, there's just, you just have to make decisions, and
Right.
things are different.
And there is more nuance to it than I think is being talked about right now in the conservative movement. There's kind of this feeling of like women are being blamed for a lot of different failures of conservatism right now. And oddly enough, women are also being blamed on the left for not accepting like transgender ideas or people in sports. So there is almost this attack on women, or at least it feels like that on social media. And you mentioned in your article that alienating women who want to work outside the home isn't helpful to the conservative movement. It doesn't grow anything. So for those young moms who are in the workforce, who maybe lean more conservative since they've had children, who are concerned about vaccine mandates or education issues, what is like the tagline to get them interested, or what is the policy that you think could draw them in? Because those people are really not being pushed to by the conservative movement. They're not being marketed to right now.
I totally agree. And that's why the conservative movement consistently struggles with suburban and working moms. That's like a demographic that we have a tough time getting, which
Mhm.
is odd, because conservative and then also free market economic policies produce the greatest options for women that want to have like a part-time job, a job with increased flexibility, some type of contract work, which all of those things are really friendly to working moms. If you're an editor, a copy editor, if there's a lot of different jobs that you can do from home that women do from home,
Mhm.
that gives them greater flexibility. Not that you have to work at home if you have children, like
Right.
plenty of women don't, but just a like abundance of opportunity of different career paths. That's what the conservative movement needs to really own, that they are delivering. Like there are unlimited options for what you would like to do, including have children, including working while doing it, re-entering, leaving the workforce. It doesn't have to be just one decision. So I think we need to own that we want to give people as many choices as possible, so that they really can do. You can't have it all, in that
Right.
no one can ever have all of anything, but you're going to have more opportunity to change your mind, um, and take different paths,
And that's
which is really,
really, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
That's really interesting because I've seen so many conservatives sort of come down on the work from home sort of epidemic that's happening here with so many people staying home because of COVID. There's sort of been this slamming of everyone's going to become a pod person and it's going to destroy your posture. And you've seen all those reports of what happens to people who work from home. But you're saying is that we should be leaning in to this idea that women can work from home and women can be growing in their careers.
Yeah, exactly. And even contract work, independent contractors, to pick up different jobs that you can do while fulfilling the things that you want to do as a mother, or maybe you're the primary worker and your husband has those opportunities. Like there's different trade-offs. So yes, we should absolutely be leaning in that we want to provide people with as many opportunities as possible, and that's what we actively are doing. Yeah, and I think there's another piece here too, which is, and I understand why people resent the idea of the girl boss working woman.
Mhm.
um I think maybe there's a little bit of sexism there, like
Mhm.
maybe, but I think it's mostly that the girl boss woman ends up, if she's not married and she has no children, a lot of people end up very lonely when they're in their 60s. Loneliness is a huge epidemic in America, and they realize that they have missed their windows because they have only thought about their career, and their corporate company doesn't love them back
Right.
like they did. So I think being resentful of maybe how just that capitalist idea has failed one particular genre of woman. I wouldn't even say it's capitalism. I would say this odd working mindset that
Mhm.
we're sold in high school and college. I think that's fair to criticize. Um, but that doesn't mean that the answer is women should stay at home and hang out with
Right.
goats on a cute little farm. Like we
Mhm.
are not there anymore. Also, most
Yes.
people don't know how to do practical skills. And there's also like, unless you have a lot of children at home or you're like tending to a like strange large castle, there is not enough work to do because we get
Hmm.
so much technology with ovens,
Right.
with like crock pots, with washing machines. There's not enough household labor
Right.
unless you're a farmer for women to do at home all day. Like there's
Right.
plenty of downtime. So
Yeah.
people just don't. So that's like the weird online thing that we also need to fight. This like odd reality of the traditional wife that like no longer exists and hasn't really existed like since a lot of labor moved it like inside
Right.
and we have electricity.
And that's a really good point to make, because a lot of times there is this sort of anger towards the girl boss within the conservative movement. But Laura Ingraham is a girl boss, and Martha McCallum is a girl boss. And many of these women we hold up in Republican politics are girl bosses. I mean, they're members of Congress, they're senators. So this idea that the girl boss is a negative idea, I think it's taken on a little bit of a life of its own. And you mentioned the idea that this sort of homesteading way of being, it's not the norm for most people. And the women who are out there talking about how important it is to do all this, then also have full-time podcast jobs. So this idea that they're just on the farm doing what they do, and it's, we've reverted back to the 18th century, that's not really what's happening. And have you seen or have you heard sort of a discontent amongst young women in the conservative movement about this idea that's going on, or about the sort of focus on the specifics of what a traditional woman should be and not allowing for any deviation, even though that woman may be a super conservative and very religious?
Yeah, I totally have. And even people that aren't political, I'm Catholic, so I kind of the people that I date and a lot of my friends are Catholic in this community. We're very like family focused, or we try
Mm-hmm.
to be family minded when dating and when interacting with each other and whatever. And it's like there's a disconnect in a lot of young men's brains because they want a woman that is values aligned and they want someone that believes in the same things that they do and is really productive,
Mm-hmm.
that is also at the same time really interested in absolutely dropping everything, like almost the second that they have children, to live a particular life.
Mm-hmm.
However, they're kind of unwilling to sacrifice the income that you
Right.
expect with a dual income household, or they're not
Right.
making enough money that would be able to support such a thing. So I think conservative thought leaders, I don't think normal conservative like
Right.
working class
Yeah.
voters are thinking this way, but you have to think about how does what I think that I want actually play out, and will
Mm-hmm.
that get me a spouse that I
Right.
actually want that is values aligned.
Right. That's definitely true. And a lot of times the voices in conservatism who try to say, we're not at a point now where a single income can provide even just the bare necessities, they're sort of squashed out in favor of this perfect ideal. And you write in the article about trying to get away from this binary choice and instead have a joyful, holistic view of family. And I think that's mainly what young women in the conservative movement want. They're not going to accept giving up the right to vote, or not being able to go outside, or not really having lives on their own. So for advice for these conservative thought leaders, or for like conservative influencers, what would you say is the message they could be pushing daily to try to at least increase interest amongst young women on social media for conservative principles or values?
I think a big missing piece to this is talking about the benefit of multi-generational households, because
Mm-hmm.
that is a way to encourage like large family formation and connection. And
Mm-hmm.
that also gives the flexibility of women working more and not being completely like unable to leave the house if they're not paying for childcare or something like
Right.
that. Like talk about, you should maybe move back to your hometown and live next door to your parents so that they can help out a couple hours a day, so your wife can go do whatever thing that she's interested in, or she has the space to pursue whatever career that she's interested in. um that we should that's a I think that's a big missing piece. And also, don't tell women that they have to pick,
Right.
because that is true to an extent. There are trade-offs with every decision, but saying that they have to choose is going to continue to drive all of the normal young women away, because you really can do whatever you want. There's just different costs associated with it, just like buying a car.
That's definitely true. And you mentioned how some of the brightest, like minded women in the conservative movement have been working. I mean, we have Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, and if we followed the logic of sort of the political thought leaders, she would not necessarily be there. So it is a modern age, and we should, as the conservative movement, be taking the advantages of that. And I wonder, do you think that there needs to be more communication to young men in the conservative movement than having this sort of one-sided selflessness where the woman, like you said, is willing to give up everything and go forward is a little bit selfish? Do we need to be pushing more of a communication level to the young men of the conservative movement at this time?
Yes, I totally think that we do. I think that Jordan Peterson does a very good job of this. How he talks about his relationship with his wife, I
Yeah.
think is very helpful. So I'm encouraged to see him coming into more events and talking to people about, marriage is a partnership. It is not one person's a servant to the other. Like that is how you end up with divorce.
Mhm.
Talking about strategies to avoiding divorce, because if you somehow convince like a nice normal girl that she is going to do exactly what you want and fit this family mold, she might one day wake up, if you're not in a true partnership, and just
Mhm.
bolt because she's unhappy. That was like something that we saw kind of in the 60s and was
Right.
really championed by a lot of the nostalgia media that we see now. So we need to avoid losing normal people
Right.
by just championing championing. There we go. I got that word. The options, and yeah, literally Jordan Peterson, and then find people that are singing the same tune as him and put them in front of these conservative young men that are trying to change America.
And that's an interesting point. You don't want to lose the normal people, the people who have a lot of conservative values and just want to go out in the world and have a free market and have access to what is enshrined to them in the Bill of Rights. You don't want to lose those people. And it seems like there's almost this push now to make everybody in the young conservative world sort of an extremist. And we're all going to get farms and we're all going to do this and we're all going to sequester ourselves. But that doesn't really work in modern day America. So looking into like 2024 presidential candidates, what do you want to hear from a Republican nominee about the young conservative world, about young conservative women? How do you want them to address the current sort of cultural shift and issues we're having right now?
I think that the most important thing a candidate could say is we want people to have the option to have lots of children and to own a home. Because there are a lot of things baked into that, and that is a very proactive, positive message. Because if you can own a home, it means that you have enough money to afford a down payment. Uh, if you can afford to get married, marriages are pretty expensive. That like also signals economic stability,
Mhm.
and a desire for public commitment and community commitment. That's important. And to be able to afford to have children, you feel like you're in a safe place to like grow the American population. And like having a child is a very affirming thing for the country. Like
Right.
you think that we should continue to carry on, and you want to be a part of that legacy. So I think that we need to speak very positively um, about that and say we will have a more healthy economy with more jobs and more options because that helps everyone. Um, and we want affordability, because if you let people buy houses, if they're affordable enough, like they were when my parents, my grandparents were younger,
Right.
they freaking will, and they will fill them up with kids, and
Right.
it'll be wonderful. So we need someone to focus on the economy without talking about family values in a weird way.
Mhm.
I would say living them out themselves.
Right.
So there we
And
go.
that's an important point. You're supposed to be living them out. I think if you're a conservative public figure, if you want to be president, if you want to be someone with a big esteem behind them, you're supposed to be sort of living them out. And I want to know, just sort of in closing, this idea that, the language directed at young men is very much just find a traditional wife and it'll be fine and all these things. In my world, I've found that some men and couples find that alienating because they don't like the way women are discussed. They don't like this idea that all men are going to be this way and all women are going to be that way. Do you see this language alienating maybe some like independents who are couples or independent young men who maybe are not comfortable with the level of extremism in the Republican Party, the conservative movement, about women's roles or about cultural norms right now?
Yes, I definitely do. I also think there's another piece to this, that we're lacking some masculine responsibility in the culture, like in general, also in the conservative movement. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that we need to encourage like strength, like
Mm-hmm.
masculine strength in general. And I think that will help people have more confidence to express what they want in relationships and to be comfortable with compromising and setting goals as couples. Like those are qualities that theoretically should be taught at home but like we can do our best to instill through school, through like reading great books and
Mhm.
understanding what makes someone a strong decision maker. So I think that's also an important piece of the puzzle. We need strong men who understand what they want, and we need capable women who have a lot of options, who are also able to confidently decide what they want. And we can't be trying to put them into neat little boxes, because we can have the confidence that most people do want to get married.
Right.
Most people do want to have children. If we make that affordable and we let that happen, it will happen.
And it really is that affordability that's become a major issue. Like in California, there are young people who want to get married, who want to have families, and they simply cannot find housing that they'll be able to pay for and pay for the expenses of a child on top of that. So in your view, are we in the time where maybe you need sort of a national push within the conservative movement to prioritize affordability over some other issues that we're dealing with right now? Do we need to be pushing that on sort of the RNC policy level, that affordability will lead to a growth in families in the US?
Yeah, yes, I think so. I think each state has such uniquely different housing challenges. I think that's also there's this organization called like it's like the National Association of Governors. There's the National Association of Republican Governors. I think that would be a great topic for those for states to try to figure out themselves so that they could figure out what models are encouraging higher birth rates and higher like family home ownership in their states. Because like a housing issue in like San Diego is going to be very different from a housing issue in Cleveland.
Mhm.
Also, it may be manifesting as the same problem. So I think we need to try different solutions and then see how they work. But we need to do that like within the next 2 to 3 years.
Right. We're very much sort of running out of time. And for our audience, for the young female viewers, what would be your advice for how they can get involved more in politics or in journalism or anything like that to try to get their voice out right now in this tumultuous political landscape in the US?
I think the most underrated thing is writing letters to the editor in like your local newspaper,
Interesting.
and just like reposting things on your story and chatting about them, or joining a book club, which doesn't even have to be like a political book club, but joining book clubs in your hometown. There's like plenty of options if you want to be like a national writer. There's like America's Future Foundation, like Turning Point, all the college clubs. They all have like lots of paths, but I think high impact and high like social return will be like those more local things where you can talk
Mhm.
to people in your hometown, because people care, and you can actually have a lot of high impact if you just give some feedback even to like your local city council or something. So all those things are very achievable and then would make you feel really good because you're probably more likely to see something happen. I would also say like if you really, and this is like a challenge in my own life as like a young person, you really need to take dating seriously if you
Mhm.
want to get married and have children. And you need to be very serious about your intentions. That doesn't mean you have to be boring, but you just need to communicate what you want, in a way that doesn't scare men. But understand that like life is quite long, but it's also quite short.
Mhm.
And really, your time to find a partner that you want to have kids with, it is ideally before you're 32, before you're really stressed out about things. It doesn't mean that like sometimes God doesn't give us those people until we're older, but it's something to think about sooner rather than later if you can, because you want to give yourself like the largest time horizon to figure out issues. And it's also good to have a partner in life
Right.
in general.
Definitely. I think that's really good advice for young women on all ends of the political spectrum right now in America. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people follow you on social media to keep up with your posting and your writing?
On Twitter and Instagram, my or tagline name is at Ideal Patricia. So IDEAL Patricia, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Perfect. And we'll link all that below. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your article.
Thanks.